Hi, this is Roger and thanks for joining me on my channel. This set of short video clips will show all of my orchids as the growing season gets underway. And then at the end of the season I'll film them all again and do a direct comparison so you can see how they've progressed. These are the befores of the before and after idea. Hope you enjoy them. These are my three Dendrobium phalaenopsis types. They seem to be growing better this year than they have in the past, but then they did get quite badly hit by bugs. You can see the residual damage on the older leaves on the older canes, but the new canes seem to be coming on well. So this one is a Dendrobium phalaenopsis no ID, and I haven't got a tag associating the blooms with the plant, so I haven't got a clue what colour it is. I think it's one of the ones that has deep purple and fades to white in places, but I'm not sure. Anyway, as far as growths are concerned, I have a relatively small new growth on the left there by the stake, another new growth pushing on well next to it, a couple of young new growths down there, and another new growth round the back here. There are some smaller new growths that I don't know whether they will develop as well as some of the others, but they've all got a whole growing season ahead, so we'll see how we get on with that one. Hasn't bloomed for quite some time, but then last year it just did not grow well. We'll see how we can do this year. This is another no ID phalaenopsis type Dendrobium. It's actually got a keiki, this one. It has multiple new growths on it. If you look at that large cane on the left with the raffia around it, that would probably be one of the canes. It may be one that I grew. It may be what was on the plant when I got it. Some have lost their leaves. The deciduous element of these does eventually come round. It has quite a few new growths. It's got a relatively small one there. It's got another one hiding behind that leaf sort of in the centre of the plant, and then quite a large one pushing up the back. I can see 1, 2, 3, 4 effective new canes that are growing at this point. And again, this one just did not grow well last year. If that keiki gets decent root system on it, I will probably just poke it down in the pot. It can grow with its parent. There's no point in starting a new one, I don't think. These are common as muck. They don't cost a lot of money. They're easy to get hold of, the no ID types. And, hopefully that will grow well this year. And this is the last of the phalaenopsis type. This one has actually got a name. It's actually Thai Angel. It does have beautiful blooms. The plant was failing badly, or it looked as though it was. Again, probably my lack of knowledge or can't be bothered to look things up. But this large fat cane was in bloom when I got it, and that's the reason I got it, because the blooms are smashing. That dropped its leaves, and it promptly dropped its leaves on the other two canes, and I thought, oh hello, that one's on its way out. But then, it did what a lot of dendrobiums do. They are deciduous at the end of the day. It grew 2 new growths, so that's what I'm with now. I've got 2 nice, strong new growths coming on the plant. Yeah, there is some active root growth on there. So, yeah, we'll see how those 2 new growths do. If they can get as big and fat as that, because that was a nursery grown cane, and you know what they're like, perfect conditions and everything. But if I can get 2 canes up close near that, I'll be well pleased. And then hopefully we can see the blooms. It's Epidendrum nocturnum, this one. Very small plant when I got it. It didn't have a very good root system. I would suggest now it has got quite a good root system. The 3 coming out from the base of the plant that are bright white, that's the ones it's growing this year, plus that one there's branched, pushed out one from somewhere inside there, and another one that buried itself in the mount has now decided to come out the other side and continue growing. The latest cane, the large one, is the one that I grew last year, and it continued a bit through the winter, and it looks like it's going to bloom, so that'll be a first timer. But yeah, we'll see what new growths it actually pushes out along to go along with its new roots. But it seems to be happy. The damage on those leaves was bugs when that was a tiny little new growth. The rest of the growth has grown clean, and as I say, it looks like it's going to bloom. Now this cute little rambling miniature is Epidendrum polybulbon, but I think it's now called Dinema or something like that. But this is pushing up new growths. It's okay, it's growing new roots, it's doing okay, although most of the new growth unfortunately at the moment looks like it's at the very top of the plant. This plant is basically a base down the bottom of the mount, which is where most of the roots were when I got it, and some extending rhizomes that root all along the length of the rhizome. So I pointed it up the mount for obvious reasons. I could have pointed it down, but I did it that way round, and most of the new growth is now at the top. I was hoping the rhizomes might branch, but at the moment I don't see any signs of that. Yes, I do. There's one that's branched, so it is capable of branching, so maybe I'll get some new growths lower down. But yeah, we can see how far up the mount it's got so far, and we'll see how much that progresses. Non-bloomer at the moment. It looked like it might, but then it didn't, so we'll see how that progresses. There's even some new growth coming out the side there, so yeah, we'll see how that pushes on. And this is a little one all on its own. It's got no family, brothers or sisters or anything. It's just a loner, and it's a Rodriguezia liana. And it was a present from Rachel, popped in a box, and it's doing its root thing, like it's going out of fashion, in all directions, upwards, downwards, all right round the back. Yep, so I'm very impressed with the roots it's pushed out. And its single new growth for me is the one on the left there, so it's growing out that way. I don't see any signs of another new growth yet, but that new growth is only just starting to mature, and it's a very young plant, so hopefully it will push another new growth out in the not too distant future, but again we'll have to wait and see. It's a pity that leaf is back to front, because it doesn't photosynthesize very well that way round, but that's just how it got mounted, and it seemed that this was the best leaf at the front, so that was the one to face the light. It was the largest, and now it's got a shiny new one to help it out, so we'll see how that one progresses. But loads of new roots, no new growth yet apart from the one that I've already grown, so we'll see how that gets on. A pot full of Dendrobium kingianum hybrid keikis that I stuck in the pot last year. They're going mad at the moment, pushing up canes, you know, the likes of this. That's why I got rid of the main plant. It just got too big for too little bloom for me. So this potful's highly unlikely to be here at the end of the season, but I'm filming it just in case. The keikis were planted to sell, and given that it's got 4 good strong new growths, little one coming there and the other 3, it will be a sellable plant. But what I might do is wait until it blooms again, and it'll be even more sellable. More little keikis. These are the same keikis as another set that I've shown that are far more advanced, that came off the giant mounted kingianum hybrid that I once had and sold on because it didn't warrant the space. And again, these keikis are to grow on until they look a reasonable plant and then to sell. When this one will get sold, bash the place about, I don't know. It's more likely to be next spring, especially if it pushes up a couple of growths that decide to bloom. It's more sellable then. So it won't be around forever, but at the moment it's here. Another keiki. This is Dendrobium delicatum, which I got from Burnham's in bloom. Scent was heavenly. But yeah, just a single keiki. I'm not too happy with what it's in, but I would like to see a few new root tips showing somewhere in that pot before I dig it out, or I might just let it have a full year in that pot. But no signs of new growths yet. It's just effectively like a dormant, stalled keiki, which is often the way, but we'll see how that looks by the end of the season. Now I know that looks a bit silly, but because of what it is, it will be attempted to get it going. It's a little tiny keiki, it was far too small to come off really, but it got knocked. And it has got a couple of new roots showing, but why I'm keeping it is because of what it is. That's a keiki off my nester. So that's what we're aiming at from that tiny little keiki. It's going to be some time. This is a keiki taken last year, single leaf left on it. It's a phalaenopsis type Thai angel, and it is starting a new growth. So it'll be interesting to see how that develops in its first year of actual growth, and we'll see how that one does. This is the keikis that Rachel sent me of Spring Dreamer pollen. It's a nobly type, and lovely strong new growth, and the two canes that I was originally given. We're doing a massive new roots in this pot. I'm really pleased with the way these have taken off. So we'll see how that progresses in its first year in its new home. These are my couple of Dendrobium Stardust Firebird keikis that I broke off the main plant on its last bloom now, but they did actually bloom, and there's some things showing on the canes. Yeah, it's probably going to be a flipping keiki. This is so prone to keikis, but it has got a couple of new growths starting at the base, which is good. So we'll see how those come on. It was a really tatty plant that I just didn't want to keep. An ugly plant, loads of leafless canes in all directions, so I dumped the main plant, took a couple of keikis. I'm happy to grow those on though if they behave themselves and push growths out from the base, and not a mass of keikis everywhere, but we'll see how it goes. Nice little keiki, present from Rachel, Dendrobium Comic King. Is pushing out a nice new growth, and there's root activity in the pot. So again, you know, from a keiki, the first growth that it puts out is quite important. The bigger and stronger that one is, the more you'll get next year. So we'll see how that one progresses. A keiki that's just started to move. These are the three Dendrobium Berryoda keikis that I potted up sometime last year. They've all bloomed. Producing some good roots. This may well not be here come the end of the season, because I literally put these aside to sell, but I'm waiting for new growths to push up so that it becomes more sellable, and I'm filming it now in case I change my mind and decide to keep it, but it's unlikely. They're not my favourite blooms. We'll see what decision yet to be made. We'll get this strange little one out of the way because it's on its own. It's a Bifrenaria harrisoniae. It's an unusual looking orchid in as much as the leaves come out looking like they're going to be that shape, and then they open up completely and go flat. Very dark green leaves on this. This has been doing its roots thing over the last couple of months on the latest two growths, which conveniently are one each end. Never bloomed for me, but it's big enough to bloom, and hopefully I'll get at least one bloom off of the two new growths. We'll see how it goes, but it's growing reasonably well. This one specifically says that the bulbs desiccate in the winter. In other words, it states that that's what's going to happen, which is handy. Stops you worrying and all that stuff. But yeah, the two new growths haven't started their swelling up to form bulbs yet. They are still quite new. And another Dendrobium that's a pot full of nothing. These roots are actually hydrating, but if it wasn't for something I'm about to show, I would say the plant was dead. This is a Anosmum semialba. It's never been a strong plant for me, and like an idiot I rested it in a weakened state, which I don't think it's done it any good at all. But it has that, which is going to be a keiki, and it has that, which is another keiki. So if it's capable of growing keikis, hopefully it eventually will decide to put out a new growth from the base. And once I get a new growth from the base, and some new roots, I'll get it on a mount. it's never been that happy in that pot, even though there's loads of air and everything there. But it's in the old bark that I used to have, so the chances are that media is getting a bit acidic, and I might have to take the bull by the horns and just say you're coming out of the pot and going on a mount, whether there's any new growth or not, and then hope it does that afterwards. But yeah, there are signs of life on the plant, albeit they're tiny. So we'll see what that one does. That might not be here at the end of the season. We'll see how it goes. And this strange looking thing is Dendrobium findleyanum, and basically the old canes sticking upright were the ones I thought it was going to bloom from, and not a light. It's going mad with its root system, absolutely mad. You cannot be pleased with a root system like that. It's extensive, it's branching all over the place, a lot of it's grabbing hold of the mount, which is good. That means those ugly ties can come off soon, and it is actually going to bloom. It's got a couple of spikes, not where I was expecting them from. Got 3 canes there, and the smallest one, these are last year's canes, these 3 larger ones here, so they're my canes that I've grown, and out of the 3 the smallest one decides to bloom. Dendrobiums love to play about. Nearly as bad as cattleyas for playing tricks on you. Anyway, it has some spikes, so for the first time ever I hopefully will get some blooms. A little keiki that will come off eventually, but not yet, it's too small. So we'll see how that progresses. I don't really see any real signs of new growths that are visible yet. So yes, there is one right down the bottom, but most of the bases of the most recent canes are swelling up, which means the new growths are going to push out soon. In fact, there's one pushing out right at the very back there at the base. So the base of the canes start to swell up, the sheath splits, and out come the new growths. But this one does the new roots first, not at the same time. It's already done an extensive root system well in advance of the new growths coming out. Okay, so this one's going to have to get fed and watered incredibly well because its new growths are late, and they've got to push on and get to that big by the end of the season. It's got some work to do. Well, so have I. Feed and water well, and we'll see what that one looks like at the end of the year. It's very strange canes with those bulbous bits at every leaf joint. Looks strange, but I like it for the plant. But at least it looks like we're going to get some blooms this time. And this monstrosity is Dendrobium Rodriguezianum. It's difficult to get far enough away without knocking something over and get the whole flipping plant in. It is large, the canes are large and relatively pendulous, thank goodness. It means it gives me more choices. Currently in bloom and stacks more blooms to come. It's got quite a lot of spikes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that looks like a keiki. 6 or 7 more spikes to come, and looking at where it's actually blooming from, it's blooming on the deciduous canes, so it is that type of Dendrobium, which means all these leaves and this huge bushiness will be next year's blooming canes, which if I can rest it properly is going to be quite a show. We're looking at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 large canes going into the winter rest at the end of the season, and basically a mass of new growth. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 new canes starting now, and they will produce a new root system. Hopefully a lot of that will attach to the bark and come out of the moss, some will get down in it. So yeah, this one should show a really noticeable difference when we get to the end of the season. A lot of these leaves will probably be starting to yellow, and they will probably drop autumn, early winter, and in the meantime these canes should have grown to most of their full extent, although these did continue growing a bit even though it was being rested. Just a note for anybody who's worried about whether a cane's finished or not, these types of canes form a terminal leaf. You can see it, it's blatantly obvious. It has no signs of another one coming out, and it doesn't form the node at the base of the leaf. It just sticks out the top. And when you see that, that cane's finished growing. That's its terminal leaf. Okay, we'll see what that one looks like next year. I'm hoping for a mass bloom. Oh, and the sun's just come out as I film the bloom. You got to have some luck sometimes. I'm playing tricks with this one. This is Dendrobium glomeratum, which to all intents and purposes looks like a dead plant. There's no sign of new growths at the base, no sign of new roots at the base. But what it does have is one cane going off in that direction, and then it has this really long cane heading off in this direction, which is still actively growing. It hasn't reached its terminal leaf yet, it's still pushing on. So I'm not quite sure what this one's going to do. I desperately need to get it on a mount, but I'm not prepared to put it on a mount until I see some new growths with some new roots, at which point I'll mount it, and the two canes going in opposite directions can then both hang down in the same direction and take up half the space it takes up now. This is a flipping nuisance, this one, at the moment. Wherever it is, it's in the way. But as I said, it's going on a mount at the first signs of new growth. The plant can't be dead if it's still doing this on the end. It just hasn't done any new growths yet. I'm just patiently waiting. Yeah, strange plant that. And this is Dendrobium jenkinsii crossed with aggregatum. It has an established root system, but it is pushing out some new ones as well. It has a new growth out to the right of the plant, has another one right round the back, and it has one coming out the base of the plant hanging downwards. Don't see any more at the moment. So 3 new growths currently, and as we can see, the number of bulbs on there. We'll see how much that grows in the season. It's actually quite a fast grower. It does push out quite a few new growths, and it does them continuously through the year. It doesn't only do them at the beginning of the season, it just keeps going. So by the end of the season you end up with mature growths, and you end up with some that aren't mature, and that's how it'll have to go into its rest. It didn't get rested properly last year. I thought it too young a plant, and I hadn't had it long, but it will get a proper rest this year, and hopefully we'll see some blooms early spring next year. Fingers crossed. This is Dendrobium jenkinsii, endearingly known as the squash grape plant. Basically this is already pushing out quite a lot of new growths. There's one at the top to the left there, one in the centre of the plant, several coming out to the right here, a new one with its leaf down there at the bottom, another new one pushing out halfway along, another new one along there, and one in the middle of the plant hanging down. So it's already got quite a few new growths, and again this one will carry on pushing out new growths throughout the year. And at the end of the season, some of those are already mature now, and more will be mature, but not all of them will be mature as it goes into its rest. So we'll see how that one does. I had its first blooming this year, only 2. 2's better than none, but hopefully with a proper rest, because it had a partial rest this winter, with a proper one next winter, perhaps we can get a good blooming on that in the spring. I'll be really looking forward to it. The blooms are gorgeous and they last a reasonable amount of time. Not as long as I expected, but an amount, but very pretty blooms. Let's just hope we get some next year. This is Dendrobium Rodriguezia. It's a new acquisition for me. I haven't had this one long at all. It's already starting to push out some new roots. It had a good root system when I got it. They're all buried in and around the mount in various places, but there are some good new roots growing, and the new growth on the top has already grown probably an inch, inch and a half in places. Seems to be quite a vigorous plant. There's new growth hanging out to the left there, the 3 at the top of the plant, and some others coming out from various places. I'll be very interested to see how much growth that does put on in the season. At the moment it seems pretty vigorous. I'll be very interested to see how much growth that puts on in one season from what is quite a small plant. You know, I've seen these very, very large. They often grow into a mat. grows roots all along the canes, so it lends itself to lying flat on something and pushing out roots all along the cane, and then it pushes up new growths all along the cane, which to all intents and purposes I suppose is just another way of looking at keikis. But yeah, a strange growth pattern. I haven't got anything that grows like this, but we'll see how well that pushes on. Right, this is Dendrobium primulinum, recently mounted. Unbloomed, although it did bloom once a couple of years ago, but it hasn't bloomed since. It didn't get its proper rest this winter. I found out towards the end of the resting period that where this plant actually comes from, it does get a drier winter rest, but the temperature doesn't drop a huge amount. So I put it up in the cool winter rest section, and strictly speaking it should have just stayed down here where it was slightly warmer at night. So we'll do it properly next year, and I've got 3 nice new growths coming out to do it with. The leaves on those canes will be gone soon. That will leave all of the canes deciduous except for the 3 new growths, and we'll see how that one gets on. This is Dendrobium hercoglossum. This plant is difficult to film because different parts of the plant are at different stages. You know, last year's canes went down that side of the plant, many, not going to count them. It's currently in full flood with its blooming, but the initial blooms are starting to fade now, but it still has plenty more buds to come, some in quite an embryonic state, so it will have a succession of blooms as the initial flush fades. There are plenty more buds to come. The plant itself has got a reasonable root system, and it currently has some new growths pushing out, 3 or 4. We'll see how that goes, but it's the new canes that will push on this year. They'll continue growing through the winter slowly, and they'll continue growing through next year as well. It takes virtually 3 years for the canes on this plant to become fully deciduous, so it's in a constant state of change. Totally deciduous canes actually blooming, semi-deciduous canes that have still got some leaves actually blooming, and last year's new canes that probably won't produce any buds this year, but although I can see a couple of buds down the base of some of those canes. So strange growth pattern, but a lovely plant. Let's just see if I can get a couple of the blooms. Very pretty little flowers on this. Need to be viewed from underneath against the light to get the best effect. Okay, so that's that one. This is the large Dendrobium nesta, which is an anosmum cross, currently in full bloom on the only new cane it grew last year. Flowers are just starting to fade, but they've been out a while. But the important thing as far as the season is concerned, I do have 3 new canes. 2 that pushed on first at the top, they're the largest, and then another one pushing out lower down. New roots are growing behind them. I need to grow those 3 canes on to full length this year, and then hopefully the rest will get all 3 of them to bloom next year, which hopefully will be quite a show. But the plant itself is doing okay. You know, 1 cane last year, 3 canes this year. Progress, that's what we're after. Thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you didn't, you know what to do. And if you want to see more videos like this and my other videos, including culture, care, repotting, mounting, and mainly orchid related topics, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. That way you won't miss out on anything. And thanks for dropping by. See you next time.